I'm so proud of you. I'm glad to know you. Anything you guys need.
Thanks.
You know I mean that. I love you, buddy.
Likewise.
I really do. Thank you so much.
I love you too, buddy.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. Yes, let it out. Have a good cry. Okay, that's enough.
Oh, bravo. What a beautiful, beautiful moment in crisis actor history. One clown hugs another clown, and the human comedy perpetuates itself right in front of our faces in the media. Welcome to VladTalks. I am your host, Vlad V, and it's been a moment, but we are up and running once again. Speaking of terrible crisis acting,
too many are now telling me that hell doesn't exist, or that hell actually wasn't that bad. The indifference shown to my colleagues is disgraceful.
oh,
I'm sorry.
Officer Fanone once again giving an Academy Award-winning performance.
Was not.
Give me a fucking break. If you look at his name is Fan One. Is he even a real person? What's up with that prison tattoo on his neck? Are we expected to believe these are real officers that were in front of Congress giving their testimony about the most terrible day in the history of the United States?
This is a show. You understand? Then show us no attacking, no assault, remain calm.
We're not going to assault. We're going to be heard. Everybody, this must be peaceful.
This has to be peaceful. We have the right to peacefully assemble.
It's interesting how those very people met up with Pelosi and friends right before January 6th. And hey, isn't Don Lemon the same moron that was bad-mouthing police officers and calling them all racist and part of the systemic racism that is America?
The biggest terror threat in this country is white men.
Isn't this Officer Fanone with Lieutenant Vindman the one who heard Trump's infamous phone call that turned out to be a complete liar and a fraud? Another crisis actor, another deep state player. Listen, I know it looks bleak, but I had to make this video and I wanted to show you what I found because the devolution is here and it's playing out. And as we rapidly approach August 10th, 11th, and 12th, which is Mike Lindell's Cyber Symposium, there's all kinds of things that are unfolding at the same exact time, including the FEMA emergency broadcast, Julian Assange, and many other interesting nexuses exactly on the same date. So without further ado, I am going to show you Man in America. Here we go.
Trump, the master strategist, shocked us all when he stepped aside on January 20th and handed the country over to communists and their puppet president. But was this all part of a much bigger plan? Did Trump ever truly relinquish control, or did he just step aside long enough for the enemies to expose themselves for all to see? Was this the only way forward to avoid massive civil war while giving the American people time to wake up? What is devolution? What is a contingency government? What are these different aspects? And what are the historical examples that have been laid for what could be happening right now? But to understand what devolution is and understand the reality of devolution and see that there's actually been a lot of cases in history that have pointed towards it. And Trump has actually hinted at it quite a lot, which I'm going to show you. To understand how these things all fit together, we have to look at it from the understanding that our country is in war right now. And with the release of COVID, so why do you think there's been such a battle over the origin of COVID? It's because if this was a biological weapon, it is an act of war. The concept of devolution is a fundamental and part of the government's top secret continuity of government plans. So continuity of government is a very important term that you're going to see referenced multiple times throughout this entire document. If you think about what continuity of government would mean, it basically is ensuring that the government can still be running amidst a massive crisis. So continuity of government is putting plans in place to ensure that the government can safely operate even under, say, a nuclear attack, et cetera. Above top secret contingency plans already exist for what the military is supposed to do if all of the constitutional successors are incapacitated. Standby orders were issued to ready these plans, not just to protect Washington, but to also prepare for the possibility of some form of martial law. According to documents and interviews with military experts, the various plans, codenamed Octagon, Free Jack, and Zodiac, are the underground laws to ensure government continuity. Again, there's a term, continuity. They are so secret that under these extraordinary plans, devolution could circumvent the normal constitutional provisions for government succession and military commanders be placed in control around America. That means in February of 2020 that Trump had ordered the military to review and prepare the continuity of government plans. So this is important because shortly after the pandemic just started, and also we knew that the election was around the corner, the elections for the United States are critical infrastructure. So in an attempt to take over our election process is a threat to our critical infrastructure. Now, what he's also saying with this is that at the beginning of the pandemic, and again, it goes into some of the language, is that for Trump, this was an act of war. Okay, this was an act of war against our country, and an act of war puts in very special provisions. If there's proof that China is doing these things as an attack, that then represents a foreign country attacking us. That becomes an act of war, and that act of war opens up a lot of provisions. So yeah, China favored a Biden presidency, and as found on the famous laptop, they would have an equity stake in the admin. Okay, now. Here it says, although the fake polls said otherwise, the Democrats appeared to have little chance in 2020. We saw that. The momentum was palpable. The only way they'd be able to win the election was to blank it. How convenient that COVID would present them such an opportunity. It says, now you can decide whether it was intentional or not. There's a certain leak they're referring to, but what did President Trump say? Okay, so this is key. So speaking to reporters in the Oval Office of the White House on Wednesday, Mr. Trump said, we went through the worst attack we've ever had on our country. This is worse than Pearl Harbor. This is worse than World Trade Center. There's never been an attack like this. It should have never happened. Could have been stopped at the source. Could have been stopped in China. It should have been stopped right at the source, and it wasn't. Okay, so this is really key because I would agree with him in saying that like this was a release of a biological weapon, and not to mention the attack that happened on November 3rd on our critical infrastructure. So here's the actual theory, kind of breaking it down. He says, President Trump, with assistance from the United States military, caught our foreign adversaries aiding the Democrats with the theft. This is bigger than just mere corruption and a scandal. This is war. They let Biden assume office, but it doesn't mean anything. Any damage can be done will be reversed. So their time in office will only lead to more people wanting Trump back. Biden has no meaningful operational control over the military, which he covers in a future post, and they won't let any real harm come to us while the battlefield is prepped for whatever reveal is coming. Now, I know that there's been a lot of damage that we're seeing. You look at the southern border, it's hard to accept this is all, I guess this is all just being allowed, but realistically, there hasn't been any real damage done. They're not, aside from, say, the January 6th political prisoners, they're not rounding up Americans and putting us in gulags. They're not like, there have been some difficult things happening, but we're still maintaining. Now, as he says here, if you look at actions Trump took leading up to the election, he was prepared for anything the Democrats might pull. Our military intelligence, Space Force, which is really key that Trump started Space Force, because as we know, so many of these institutions have become so corrupted. Okay, so maybe Space Force became the perfect opportunity to create a new branch of the military that he could build out from the ground up and become loyal to him. Because as we're seeing right now, if you look at General Milley, look at the military, these places are compromised, not to mention the CIA, FBI, et cetera. Okay, so he says our military intelligence, Space Force, monitored and captured the true vote count. I believe the audits will be eye-opening and kick everything off. Now, if Trump had the vote count, why didn't he do anything? Why haven't we seen any real proof? It says that COVID changed everything. When Trump said COVID was an attack, he stated that it was worse than Pearl Harbor. If he had information that the Democrats would steal it with help from China, that would be considered an act of war. Do you think that's something Trump would allow to happen? Would our military let China install a puppet as president? We prepared for devolution after gathering information on the lab leak and activated it. This guy believes it was activated sometime between November 3rd and January 20th. Now, the other thing is saying, oh, it's too late. The Electoral College voted for Biden. There's no legal precedent outlined in the Constitution for him to be reinstated, which you see the mainstream media is pushing that. You might see Sidney Powell come out and talk about him being reinstated. The mainstream media jumps on it, or Mike Lindell. They jump on it and saying these conspiracy theories and there's no precedence for this. And he says, what he says is we're in a completely unprecedented situation. He says, if the military came out tomorrow and showed you definitive proof that China assisted the Democrats in this theft, would you say, yeah, well, no precedent. Can you show me to my assigned gulag? Or would you say, F this can't be allowed to stand? Trump chose the latter. We need to step back and review everything that's happened since the release of COVID. Our enemies conspired to attack the USA with a bioweapon, to steal X with one of our political parties. This is an actual coup. This is not just about an election. This is much bigger. This is about the world's greatest nemesis, and China is the enemy of the world. Okay, this is about the greatest evil nation on earth that is trying to bring down America, which is the nation that is standing in its way of it basically working to implement a global communist system. The Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA, is the intelligence branch of the United States military. Their mission is to provide intelligence on foreign militaries to prevent and decisively win war. The director is a principal advisor to the Secretary of Defense. They typically serve 3-year terms. The current director, Lieutenant General Scott D. Barrier, was appointed by Trump and confirmed by the Senate on July 30th, 2020. The DIA is similar to the CIA, but there's a crucial difference between the two. And it says, while the CIA is focused on providing intelligence to the president and his cabinet, we in the DIA are the principal source of foreign intelligence to combat-related missions. It's very different, okay? Basically, so it says the CIA primarily provides intelligence, and the DIA is related to combat-related missions. So how does this tie into this Chinese defector? I'm not sure if you recall, but there was the defector. Vice Minister Dong Jingwei of the Ministry of State Security, MSS, defected from China to the US on February 10th, 2021. Dong was previously the chief of counterintelligence for the MSS. If true, Jingwei would have been the highest level Chinese defector in history. It would be as if General Flynn, when he was the director of the DIA, defected to China with all of our military intelligence secrets. He says some of the information that Dong reportedly brought with him was proof that COVID was a bioweapon that was intentionally released. Think about the change in the narrative that has occurred on COVID. Right? They're saying, why isn't our savior, Dr. Fauci, being rammed down our throats via the mainstream media? He's virtually blacklisted and had his ties to Wuhan exposed. Right? So the whole narrative here changed after this defector came out. So how does this defector, though, relate to devolution? Well, one thing is that as it relates to the DIA is the agency that the defector went to. He didn't go to the FBI, didn't go to the CIA, which we know how corrupted those organizations are. He went to the DIA, right? Who's in charge of the DIA? It's the guy, Lieutenant General Barrier, that Trump appointed. Okay, so how does this tie back into devolution? Well, the DIA leadership believes there are, quote, Chinese spies or sources inside the FBI, CIA, and several other federal agencies. He has proof. The defector brought terabytes of data with him. Included in the data is the names of Chinese spies working in the US and names of US citizens who provide intel to China, as well as Hunter and Joe's business dealings with Chinese entities, and how the Chinese government gained access to a CIA communications system, leading to the death of dozens of Chinese people who were working with the CIA. The implications here are massive. So the DIA, remember, who is the principal source of intelligence for combat-related missions, kept the defector a secret because the president was implicated by the information that the defector provided. So even the Biden admin was not aware of this defector. Okay, so this, again, the implications are massive, absolutely massive. So is it possible he's been here since long before February? I believe Trump had a role in this, and the defector provided information that helped prove the election thing. Why would a Chinese defector come to the United States in February with information implicating Biden, knowing there are CCP spies everywhere? He either came before Biden took office and the military kept his presence quiet, or he came in February as reported, knowing for certain the military would protect him by not telling the Biden administration. Both scenarios point to devolution. Now, how so? Final thought. According to sources, Dong told DIA debriefers that at least a third of Chinese students attending US universities are PLA assets or part of the 1,000 Talents plan. And they have way more than just college-aged assets here. China has an army within our borders, which is absolutely true. They have an army sitting on our borders, down the borders of Mexico and Canada, which we've covered that before. They have infiltrated and compromised nearly everything. That is why it is taking so long for Trump to make his reveal. That is why there has been an insane level of military spy aircrafts over the US. Trump and the military are trying to neutralize as much of the threat as possible to minimize the fallout. Our enemy will fight tooth and nail to hold on to their power, but Trump and our military are preparing to deliver a death blow to them, and they have the help of the defector Dong Jingwei. what's going to happen if Trump reveals that he's actually in control, and if he reveals that the military is in control, and they start taking action to right what's happening in the White House and all these things? Do you think it's just going to be Antifa that's taking to the streets? Or do you think that it's possibly going to be all these Chinese as well that are here on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party? Okay, so he has to be able to neutralize that. And what's also important is that it's not just about neutralizing it, right? As I said in the intro, he had to give the American people time to wake up. Because what would have happened in January if Trump came out with this information? The nation would have split. It could have entered into a civil war at that time. But fast forward to now, there are so many people that I know that voted for Biden that are now looking at the situation and they're saying, whoa, actually, I think that they were right all along. Like, look what's happening in our country. Look at the border. Look at gas prices. Look at inflation. Okay, this is the entire situation has changed drastically now. To me, it seems like there's two triggers that they're waiting for before they can release this information. And those two triggers are, one being that they have to have enough of the American people that would support the information they're bringing out. All right. Let's say that they brought this information out January 20th. If only 50% of the nation would believe it or accept it, there could have been a massive civil war. So they had to wait. As Trump has even said, he's talked to us before in his little notifications he puts out, he has to allow people to see what the current regime is going to be doing. Okay, he had to allow them to see it, and people are seeing it now. So they had to wait until enough people were willing to accept that information. And I had heard different sources saying it was around 80%, that 80% of the people of the nation would be able to support them coming out and saying, hey, look, this is what really happened. The military had to take control, et cetera. So that was one. But they also, too, is they needed the people to be able to show what truly happened November 3rd. They needed to come out on top of massive evidence being put out there. Now, if you think about what's happening right now between two things, you have the Maricopa audits and you have Mike Lindell's cyber symposium. So both of these, and it's not just Maricopa, but Maricopa is the one that's really within a few weeks of their report coming out. Mike Lindell's event is August 10, 11, 12. Very, very critical timing. There's also an emergency broadcast system test, I believe, on August 11th. Interesting timing. Okay, but these are instances of we the people doing things. A lot of the audits nationwide are funded by American patriots, and they're conducted by American patriots, people that are volunteering to get trained, go to the Coliseum every day and count these things. Okay, count the votes, do all the auditing. So again, they had to wait until this evidence was coming out that the people were presenting. And so that's the brilliant strategy, because even though I believe that Trump captured all the evidence, Space Force captured all the digital evidence of what was happening, it had to be the people that were bringing that to the public. Because as much as a lot of the Americans that hated Trump wouldn't trust Trump, they're much more likely to trust their fellow American, especially a group of their fellow Americans. In July 2016, Barack Obama signed the still classified presidential policy directive in accordance with PPD 40. Each department was to maintain continuity programs. Quote, agencies were ordered to have not just a line of succession, but also one of devolution, a duplicate chain of individuals secreted outside Washington, available in a catastrophic emergency. Devolution involves procedures to transfer statutory authority and responsibilities. This is secondary to the secondary designated staff to sustain essential functions. Now, what's interesting is that if you try to piece this all together, they did not believe Trump was going to get in 2016, right? The 16-year plan was supposed to be 8 years of Obama, 8 years of Hillary. That was their plan. Trump was not supposed to win in 2016. So a lot of the things that they set up, and it wasn't just Obama, this was the Bushes, this was the Clinton, this is stepping into Obama, is they were putting a lot of these presidential powers in place to allow, especially Hillary in the final two terms, to basically implement the control needed to bring down our country. Okay, even the ability to suspend the Constitution, there's different things. So they were not planning on Trump getting into office. So it's almost like they set up all these rules for their people. Say, okay, hey, Obama's going to sign off on this, Clinton will sign off on this, allowing the presidents to do these things. Trump gets in. It's like, oh no, we just gave him all the keys to those switches, right? So back to what he's saying here. He's saying even though every federal government and agency department has COG and continuity of government's continuity of operations plans, the devolution that President Trump initiated was done through the military and the Department of Defense for one primary reason. Remember, I fully believe that we are at war. Now, it says, not the war you picture in your head involving thousands of troops clashing on a battlefield. This war is clandestine in nature. It involves cyber warfare, information warfare, electronic warfare, intelligence warfare, space warfare, and I also believe biological warfare, COVID. The only option at Trump's disposal was to initiate devolution using our military, okay? Now, what he's saying is that if Trump is going to pull off devolution using the military, he has to have the right man at the top of the food chain. And this graph there illustrates the National Command Authority and how all the command basically is coming from the Secretary of Defense. So just 2 days after AP declared Biden as the winner, Trump promoted this man, right? So Trump put Christopher Miller, he was the former acting Secretary of Defense, and he was promoted to the Secretary of Defense role on November 9th, 2020. Before Trump left office, he changed positions of all these key people, whether it was FEMA, in the military, and special operations. He put all these people into place before he stepped out. And a lot of it was done so quickly, even the mainstream media was confused by it. They're saying, why is Trump doing this? He's leaving the office in a month. He's leaving the office in 6 weeks. Why is he doing all these departmental changes? Okay, so within days of his promotion of Christopher Miller, Trump began making moves within the DoD and Pentagon that many considered unusual, as I mentioned. On November 10th, Anthony Tata was promoted to senior official performing the duties of Undersecretary for the Defense for Policy, right? Now, this guy you put in basically saying, in other words, one of the very first positions filled after Chris Miller became acting Secretary of Defense was the position that develops DoD policy and provides oversight for continuity of operations and continuity of government. So one of the first people Trump puts in place, his main role is basically overseeing devolution. Now, this is incredible right here, okay? Check out this screenshot from Trump's Federal Mission Resilience Strategy that he released on December 30th. It describes how our special operations are operating a devolution government right now. The routine and regular performance of assets and distribute managed through a governance structure which reinforces accountability at all levels of government. Sustainment depends on the successful conduct of assessment and distribution. Sustain refers to the ability to continue the direction and performance of essential functions and services that required minimum performance levels throughout the course of realized impacts from one or more threats. Sustainment throughout distribution can be implemented at proactively distributed operational locations, devolution locations, or through other mitigation efforts. Under day-to-day operations, sustainment could be carried out at multiple distributed locations, while other locations, for example, relocation, devolution, and alternate processes are leveraged to support realized threat operations. Remember, Kash Patel was designated to lead the transition on behalf of the DoD. He, along with Secretary of Defense Miller and the rest of Trump's allies, refused to provide information about current operations, particularly in the special operations realm. So, right, this is the Pentagon, the Department of Defense. They were supposed to transition all these things over to Biden. They refused, especially the special operations. They refused to pass that information along to Biden. Interesting, isn't it? Makes you think maybe what the special information were the details of devolution. So to recap, right, gives a little recap. So Trump prepares for November 3rd. You can read what that says there. China colludes with Democrats to do that. You can read what it says there. Trump caught them all and prepares his countermove. Massive personnel moves at DoD and Pentagon to place Trump allies in key roles. Okay, that's really key. Implementation of what appears to be a devolution plan for our special ops, refusing to tell incoming Dems about special ops. Checkmate. How can this be real? That's what he's asking. When January 20th came and Trump boarded Air Force One, leaving Biden as the president, I was devastated. Everyone knew the truth about the election. There was no possible way Trump was just going to walk away. Then he did. I honestly couldn't comprehend what had happened. Like many of you, I could feel it in my bones that this couldn't be how the story ends. I started searching for answers. The devolution theory was one of the only plausible scenarios I could see playing out, but I always ran into the same question. Devolution isn't meant to be permanent and certainly wouldn't be able to last for 4 years. How does President Trump come back before 2024? The reality is I don't think he ever left. With this in mind, if you go back and you look at a lot of the things that Trump has talked about, if you look at a lot of things that he's been discussing with us, he's been saying, you can see how he's trying to tell us what's going on. He's giving us hints. Now, there's one thing I want to point to here, which is actually quite interesting. This was a speech during Trump's CPAC speech when he was talking about the White House and how Biden was in the White House, but he specifically says the White House with the lowercase w and the lowercase h. And this is very interesting because if you look right here, it's saying, is White House capitalized? Well, if White House is not capitalized, it's just a White House, right? I live in a White House. If it's capitalized, it means the White House.
We will take back that glorious White House that sits so majestically in our nation's capital. Beautiful White House, that's small letters. White House, that beautiful White House And it is the most beautiful house of all. That's small letters, White House, that beautiful White House.
White House, right? He's telling us something.
Like Michigan, and then the Michigan Republican Senate, a bunch of rhinos doesn't want to move on it, like as an example, Arizona.
We need you back.
You're going to be very happy.
Wow. Now that is some good news. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next video.